Hello. Welcome to our session on configuration and update management. You guys are more than welcome to come up a little closer if you want. My name is Christopher Bash. I'm a program manager. I'm here with Ravi.
Ravi Chintalapudi, program manager in Azure Security and Management. Thanks.
So we've got a lot of content today, some pretty cool demos. We're going to kind of get straight into it. As far as an agenda, we're going to give you a quick background for context on the Azure Security and Operations Management portfolio. Then I'll cover configuration management, the features we have there. Ravi will talk about keeping your Windows and Linux servers up to date, the latest patches. Throughout the session, we'll be covering new features, but we'll also give you a projection of where we're headed with the roadmap. And we have some new pricing to discuss, which we think you'll find quite agreeable. Key things we want you to take away is that we have a comprehensive set of configuration management features for your Azure resources, for your on-prem resources, for resources in other clouds. And likewise, we have rich update management capabilities that covers your hybrid cloud VMs. How many of you are familiar with OMS and Azure Security and Operations Management? Thanks. So I want to quickly give the context here. Azure Security and Operations Management is our portfolio of robust management features. These are all have a few commonalities. They're all cloud-based services. There's no infrastructure for you to maintain. It's very easy to start up. It's 1 or 2 clicks or a command line operation to sign up for these services. And they all span Azure management, so you can cover your Azure resources, and there's a lot of first-class integrations there. But we also cover on-prem, AWS, Google Compute. So hybrid cloud is supported across the board. These features include monitoring features like log analytics, application insights, network performance monitor, service map, backup and disaster recovery in our protection portfolio. We have some new features in the governance area around cost optimization and policy. This is to help you manage cloud sprawl. Security comes in the form of Azure Security Center, which is a very advanced threat monitoring, audit log analytics, baseline monitoring set of features to keep your environment secure. And Ravi and I will be talking about our configuration and automation portfolio. How do you automate processes, do configuration management, and keep your servers up to date. The context we're operating in today, what we really want to talk about is how you manage a secure and reliable environment through configuration management and update management. This is, again, we can work in Azure and beyond. And in being a cloud service, we can scale with you. You don't have to worry about overloading your management infrastructure. And while, I think one thing to add is that Azure Security Center I mentioned is this really rich set of features for monitoring the security of your environment. The angle we're talking about today is how you keep that environment running securely, how you deploy secure configurations, and keep the servers up to date. We'll get straight into it. Our configuration management features cover a few areas. We have inventory feature to help you discover what you have in your environment, a change tracking feature to help you monitor for changes to your environment, and then configuration management features built on PowerShell desired state configuration to deploy and enforce configurations. How many of you have used Azure Automation before? Okay. So if you have not, the way you sign up for these features is go into the Azure portal, click New, and create an automation account. And then you'll see them there, and it'll walk you through how you add agents. So the inventory feature is brand new. It's in public preview now. This is an agent-based feature. It uses the OMS agent for Linux or the Microsoft monitoring agent to get data. And periodically, the agent will send snapshots of configuration surfaces. The installed software, configured servers and services or daemons for Linux, files that you specify to watch, registry values that you specify to collect. These snapshots are then ingested into log analytics, indexed, and become searchable. This works for Windows and Linux. And in log analytics, you can actually filter for time range and look at different snapshots over time. We talked to a number of customers as we were planning for this feature. We think there's some pretty cool scenarios this lights up. The first is just discovering servers in your environment with a particular software package. Maybe you saw a news article that said a particular version of OpenSSL has a vulnerability. You want to understand your exposure. Maybe if you've read the news recently, you're concerned about Apache struts too. You might want to look for that in your environment. And also use this for audit scenarios, identifying instances of licensed software in your environment. It's just a very simple search across your environment to find software. We can use this inventory data to create groups of servers. So if we want to create a group of all of our SQL 2016 servers, because we want to patch them on a specific maintenance window, we can save that search query and turn it into a computer group and then use that in update management, or we can use that in dashboards or visualizations. Again, we can do more of a diagnostic, see what we had versus what we have. And we can do some baseline verifications. Maybe you have an auditor who's asking you to demonstrate that an anti-malware service is running and configured for automatic startup on all your servers. It's a fairly simple search query. Change tracking is a very closely related feature to inventory. In fact, it uses the same agent and the same data snapshots. The difference here is we're actually diffing the files, identifying the deltas between the last snapshot and the current snapshot, and ingesting that change as a data item. So now the changes to your environment become searchable. And we're looking at the same current set of data around software, files, daemons and services, registry values. Additionally, in a new feature for your Azure resources, we're overlaying the Azure activity log events in the portal. So when you're looking at your changes, you can see the activity log events that correspond in that time range. So if you see a bunch of changes on an Azure VM and you want to know if something was done through Azure, like a new extension was pushed or a change was made to the VM, you can look at those activity log events. And this is contextual. If you're looking at a single VM in change tracking, you'll see the events for that VM. If you're looking in the automation account at all the changes, you'll see a broad set of activity log. One of the things we've heard a lot from customers is they like to use this feature to audit their process and procedure around change control. So they're looking for unauthorized changes that may have been made outside a change window. We think it's very important in diagnosing issues. So if we see a change in a performance counter that's significant or an outage, and we want to know what happened at the time that changed, we can look for, maybe Java was updated when we started seeing these errors on our web application. We can alert on changes. If we're concerned about the state of a service, we can create an alert when that service state changes in our environment. It can help us understand what has happened during an update cycle. If we ran a yum update on a Linux server and we started seeing some change in behavior, we can actually go and identify what was actually included there. And again, we can do diagnosis and more of a forensic picture in the past as well. So change in inventory, we think, are key features for discovering your environment, for monitoring it. And in a new feature, those are now available in Azure, the Azure portal, when you look at a VM. So when you go to look at a virtual machine in Azure, you'll see on the left-hand menu a change tracking and inventory item. If the VM is not currently set up to collect data, it's a simple click or two to push the agent, which is done through an Azure virtual machine extension, and it'll start collecting data. And you see that contextual view of changes for the VM and inventory off of that VM. So beyond discovery and monitoring the configurations in our environment, the core of our configuration management features come in the form of PowerShell desired state configuration and the service we built around it. And this is a robust configuration management platform. Again, we support Azure VMs as first-class citizens, as well as any VM, Windows or Linux. You can assign configurations to nodes, monitor their status. For those Azure VMs, it's very trivial to add, to connect them with an ARM template, the PowerShell push of an extension, or directly from the portal. This is built around the PowerShell desired state configuration technology, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But in short, we can define configurations in a declarative language. We can set property equals value in a very simple domain-specific language. We can import those in the backing modules into our automation account, compile them, and if you're not familiar with DSC, compilation is the process of taking that configuration with any customization parameters and turning it into a machine-readable document we call a MOF. You can assign those to nodes and then see ongoing status for those. That's a 30-second introduction. DSC itself is, as you might have guessed from the name, is a PowerShell technology. And this is what we call a declarative configuration platform. So when you define your desired state, it's up to DSC to make that happen, to make it so. So you might say a particular service should have automatic startup and be running. And it doesn't matter what the state of that service was when the configuration is applied, that is the end state DSC will bring it to. So you don't have to worry about conditionally checking the state of the server in your imperative scripts and then trying to handle different cases. It's what we call item potent. We can apply the same configuration over and over and over again and come to the same result. DSC can protect against configuration drift. So if we configure our DSC agent in what we would call autocorrect mode, any changes to the configuration will be brought back into desired state on an iterative run. And I'll talk more about this a bit. We think DSC is a very powerful and fundamental tool for doing continuous deployment scenarios, for doing application deployments. So if you've not seen a DSC configuration before, I think this is a good illustration of that language I was talking about. So this is in PowerShell. The DSC configuration is a .ps1. We define a configuration and give it a name, in this case, Apache role. We would import any DSC resource modules. There are many, many DSC resource modules available on the PowerShell gallery. We'd assign a node, which is like a role name. And then each of these additional instances is an item of configuration. So we have a Linux package HTTPD that we say is present. That means we'll make sure that HTTPD is installed on that server. Same for mod SSL. And then that the HTTPD service is running and enabled. And this will actually go set the right run levels on the Red Hat server this was intended for. And if it's not running, it'll actually start it. So that's kind of the DSC, the fundamental DSC technology. The service in Azure Automation DSC is a cloud service that allows you to import your configurations, your backing modules, do compilations, and makes those configurations available to nodes. Nodes communicate with the service over REST over SSL. They're periodically going and asking if there's any change in configuration. They're periodically checking their configurations and sending granular reporting back on their current state. Every operation in the service can be automated with a REST API, can be done through the portal and through Azure PowerShell, which makes it a very automatable and flexible configuration management platform. which I think is, I want to spend a little time on because I think that's a key value add. Have most of you used like Azure Automation runbooks before? A few. So in Azure Automation, we have a concept called runbooks. These are, think of them as PowerShell scripts, although we just announced support for Python runbooks for Linux. But generally, we're talking PowerShell scripts, and these can run in a private container in Azure or on a VM you assign. The runbooks can be invoked manually through Azure PowerShell on a schedule when an incoming webhook is configured, or even we've newly added support for Azure Event Grid, so you can monitor for events in your Azure environment or other publishers sending events and trigger runbooks off of that. So we have this capability to run in a serverless cloud-side container, Azure PowerShell. We have the ability to automate every configuration operation with PowerShell and have many different triggers to do those operations. This is really flexible. So, a few scenarios. We might want to have an ITSM ticket trigger a change to a configuration. Maybe go into ServiceNow, call a webhook. A webhook sends makes a configuration assignment call in the automation service, and we change the configuration based on the properties from that webhook. Maybe we want to do scheduled maintenance where we assign a configuration that drains resources, shuts down services, takes things offline at the start of a maintenance window, and assign another configuration at the end that rehydrates, brings services back up, validates that everything's working. Additionally, since most tools these days can talk REST and webhook, we have almost unlimited potential to integrate other tools and workflow scenarios into your configuration management. In a similar vein, we can actually send those granular reports, the details of the configuration coming from the nodes, into log analytics. That gives us some additional flexibility. We can create Power BI dashboards on those reports and delegate those to different people to look at. There's additional ITSM integration features in the log analytics ITSM solution. If we want to use that pattern to create incident in ServiceNow on a failed configuration. And we can do alerting based on failures. In log analytics for alerting, we define a search query that we want to alert on and build an alert off of that. And since the DSC reports are in there and searchable, we can do that. So DSC, I'm going to spend a few more minutes on, we think is very important in your continuous deployment scenarios. Fundamentally, DSC is an enabler for configuration as code, which helps you build repeatable server configurations. DSC is a great tool for managing your baseline or security settings for your servers. And oftentimes we might have, say, Windows servers running in Azure that are not domain joined, and we want to do some things we might have traditionally done in group policy. DSC is a really useful tool there because we can have the servers talking to automation DSC, and there are tools that will let you take a group policy object backup, an ADMX file, and turn it into a DSC configuration in a simple script execution. So let's look at DSC in the deployment pipeline. And I'm just going to kind of overview this, but we've got some other sessions and material that go a little deeper here. So DSC is, as I said, a configuration as code enabler. If we take an ARM template, a DSC configuration, we can describe our entire workload infrastructure from Azure resources up through the application in declarative documents. We can put those in our source control. We can deploy them at will. It helps us be more agile, have repeatability, and reliability in our application deployments. The DSC agents themselves, since we need an agent in the VM, can be bootstrapped in your deployment pipeline. For Azure, we might do that through Azure PowerShell or Cross-Plat CLI to inject the extension. Or we can just take the extension definition and put it directly in the ARM template for the VM and have it automatically connect to Azure Automation. Likewise, in AWS, there are CloudFormation templates available that will bootstrap the DSC agent into your AWS EC2 VMs. If you're keeping your DSC configurations in source control, which you probably want to, there are a couple ways to manage that. We provide some runbooks that will let you synchronize your source control with the imported configurations. Another way, and one I happen to like, is we can actually have our CI tool using the Azure PowerShell import and compile the configurations during a build. So lots of flexibility in how we can keep our source control and stage configurations working together. In that vein, we have a new feature I'm going to talk about in a minute. But there's one aspect of this that is it helps you with some flexibility here. Previously, when you would do a compilation of a configuration in Automation DSC, that compiled configuration, what we call a node configuration, would be immediately available to all nodes that it was assigned to. Sometimes this isn't actually what we want. We might want to, we should probably do some testing before that goes out to all the nodes. So we talked with a lot of customers, and it seemed like the common pattern was people would actually fork their configurations so that they had a unique configuration name. So we tried to streamline and kind of bake in a similar process. When you flag a compilation job with the increment node configuration build switch parameter, the configuration stays the same, but the resultant compile configuration is treated like a build and has an incrementing number. This just allows you to compile the configuration at any time and avoid impacting production. So an ideal time to do that might be in your CI test phase. And again, we have, because we can do all these configuration management activities in Azure PowerShell, which we could call out of our pipeline tools, or in runbooks, which we can call with webhooks, we have really a ton of flexibility in how we perform these operations. So I mentioned that we can now, when we do a compilation in the service, we can increment it so that you can compile and make sure that compilation worked and do your testing without it being assigned to any new nodes. Another scenario that is fundamental to is we now have a new feature where you can schedule the deployment of a configuration, the assignment of the configuration to an array of nodes. And nodes in this case are just managed servers. So this is a new set of commandlets that allow you to batch or schedule. So we can give a list of nodes, a configuration name. You can run it now and just use that as a convenience to go deploy to all those nodes. Or we can schedule it for a point in the future. This is very handy if the only time we can make changes happens to be in the middle of the night on the weekend. One thing that's kind of cool is we build the list of nodes that we want to deploy to. This is just in PowerShell. It's just an array of nodes. And if you make a multi-dimensional array, so I take one array of my canary nodes, say a few test servers, and then I build another array of my production servers, and I assign it to both of those, the deployment will first go to the first list, and if those are successful, it'll move on to the next. And we can have 3, 4, 5, as many of these as we want. This just gives us an additional safety valve. So if we've done our testing and we think the configuration's good, we want to make sure that when we roll it out at scale, it's not going to break everything because of something we missed. We can send the configuration to a small set of nodes before it goes to a larger set. And I'll cover that more in the demo here. Don't really have time to cover all of these. I did just want to point out there are a ton of mostly community-built tools around using DSC, particularly in the deployment scenarios. A few maybe highlights here. Pester is the ubiquitous PowerShell testing framework, which is totally viable for your DSC resources. Chocolatey is a Windows package repository, and there are DSC resources for Chocolatey. So this is actually really convenient in standing up our application servers, because in a DSC configuration, we can simply identify the packages from Chocolatey we want on the server. We don't have to worry about what's in the image. We can just declaratively get those packages there. ADMX to DSC is the tool I mentioned. These are all hyperlinks, so after the session, you can download the PowerPoint slides and get those links. So let's go straight to a demo and have a look at all this together. Let's say unlock my laptop. Just thinking about it. All right. So let's say I'm doing operations for my company, and I'm working on some security settings. Maybe I have an audit that I'm preparing for, a new security policy. And I want to, I'm working through the list of security settings I care about. One of them is that SSL v3 should be disabled across my environment. So depending on your version of Windows, that's either done by default or not, but it's controllable through registry values. So I added those registry values to my inventory collection settings. And I can simply go into inventory, and this is all in the automation account, and search for S-channel. And I can see I've got some SSL 3.0 protocol settings here. I can jump into the details. And if I scroll over here, I've got values. It looks like a couple of my servers have SSL v3 enabled, and also drill into the full details of those data items. From this inventory view, I can actually jump to changes by clicking ... and going to change history. And this will take me straight to a view of changes specific to that inventory item. And so I can see, looks like it hasn't changed recently. So I will go to my change tracking view, have it set up for 7 days. You can see some registry changes in here. I can simply narrow the scope. And if I want to filter for registry, you can see those changes. And these are removed. Narrow it down. You can also click here on events and see the activity log. So I know my server names start with KAV. And I can filter and look at the activity log events for those VMs. So you can see how we can explore and discover the environment just using simple searches there. All right, so at this point I know that there have been some changes in my environment. Someone's been enabling SSL v3. I've got at least a couple servers with it enabled. I just kind of want to nip that one in the bud, not have that problem anymore. So I'm going to put it in my baseline. So I have a security policy I've been working on in DSC. I actually went and downloaded the Microsoft Security Toolkit, extracted one of the ADMX files, and converted it into DSC config. You can see we have some user access control settings. We want Windows Defender to be running. We want some password lockout policies, minimum password age, typical security setting type stuff. If I want to disable SSL v3, I would just add an instance for the registry value, say enabled 0. So I can copy this and add it into my policy. And these are all, my configs are all in a Git repository, so I'll go ahead and commit that. and then push. So I'm making a lot of changes in this as I'm developing this policy. I want to be agile. I want to find failures fast. So I'm actually doing some continuous integration with this. So I happen to be using GitLab for CI. Obviously, there are a ton of features in VSTS that integrate with DSC. Other tools integrate with DSC. I wanted to illustrate how we can do this really with any of our CI tools. So in GitLab, in my pipeline configuration, which is just this YAML file, I say I've got a test stage and a deploy stage. And in each one, I'm just running a PowerShell script. In the import script, I take all my configurations in the Git repository, import them to Azure Automation, and then I perform a compilation. And I'm incrementing that build number with the compilation, so once it's done, no nodes are actually pulling from it. And then in my test script, I have a hash of configuration names and test servers. The configuration is assigned to one of those servers, and then I monitor that for success. To speed things along, rather than waiting the 30 minutes for DSC to come along, I have our hybrid runbook worker, which lets me run automation runbooks on virtual machines, and I poke the virtual machines with the runbook worker and tell them to update right away. The net of it is if I go into my GitLab pipeline, I can see, there we go. I can see the job running. For the sake of time, I'm just going to jump to a prior one. Here's the last one that we passed. So my test phase, this is where I would build in unit testing and additional functional tests to make sure that's good. So I'm just trying to keep my operations, my configuration management agile and reliable. Now, I can do this anytime, middle of the day on my test servers, but we can't update our production servers, all the production servers outside of a scheduled change window, which is where the configuration deployment comes in. So I have a deployment script, and you can see I'm just going to define my canary group as a single node, and then my production group as a list of nodes, and then put those into an array. So I have two groups, effectively. I'll build a schedule by saying next Saturday, 9 p.m. I take the latest compiled configuration, and then use the start node configuration deployment commandlet. So by deploying that, it's going to set up the schedule for this Saturday at 9 p.m. You're all going to wait for this, right? All right, so now, if I come back to my automation account, I can look in schedules, and I should have a schedule for, yep, here's my two schedules, one for my Windows policy, one for my Linux policy for Saturday. And if I look in job history, you can see all the times I tested this previously. Here's a successful one and a failure. So these verbose logs are kept and available for troubleshooting those deployments. But I don't really want to hang out and watch this on Saturdays. I want to be alerted. I can take in-log analytics. I can construct a search query. I could filter this down for just the nodes I care about. But you can see this is looking at all failed DSC nodes. I can construct an alert and be alerted on that over the weekend if there's a problem with that deployment. With that, I'm going to have Ravi take over and talk about update management.
Thanks, Chris.
Ravi.
Okay. So till now, we have seen how Chris showed us to deploy configurations, how to track the changes, how to track the inventory. So other aspect of operations, that was the whole pivot what we had today, is how to keep your environment secure from update perspective. So that's what I'll be talking about for the next 30 minutes or so. CryptoWall, WannaCry, Petya, sound something familiar? Come on, guys, no one got impacted with this? Okay, so let's talk about one of those things, WannaCry. So we all must have heard or experienced the huge crisis around WannaCry, which impacted about 300,000 computers across 150 countries. So many of our customers, including us at Microsoft, have spent a lot of time and energy in securing our environments against this. In order for us to be prepared to handle this sort of situations, so the two key things for any organization is A, to get an easy assessment of which computers in my environment are vulnerable to this sort of attacks. B, how do I take an action immediately to keep them secure? That's where our update management service comes into the picture. So during the WannaCrypt crisis, when we were working very closely with our customers and partners, internal and external there, we saw a unique opportunity where we could help them by creating WannaCrypt specific assessment. So they can easily tell which computers in your environment are vulnerable to WannaCrypt so you can immediately take an action. We were able to quickly create a custom solution to address that need, and it was widely adopted, and we saw a huge spike in our solution. But before I jump on to the solution and this custom extensibility and the platform extensibility, I want to talk about how we build this product. Which of your challenges we are trying to solve? What are the new capabilities we are going to launch and Ignite this year? And the new pricing model. I'm super excited to talk all about that. Let's roll on. So before we started this project a couple of years back, we really want to understand what are the challenges you're all facing on managing updates. So we have spoken to about, we started a Moneyball exercise, which is about customer validation and engagement. And we have spoken to about 200 Windows customers, about 100 Linux admins. Average organization size was about 9,700. It shows that these are enterprise scale customers. This across industries, across the globe. And 92% of that people are either directly involved with the patching or responsible for patching. So these are real personas. So I just put a high-level summary of the top challenges. And there's an ask here. If you are facing any of the challenges which are not listed here, love to hear them at the end of the session. So I'll just cover them at a very high level. On the Windows side, the number one problem is reliability. A particular update comes and doesn't break my environment. So always customers are doing in a phased approach. I already see someone nodding their heads, like that's what it looks like you're doing. The next big challenge is orchestrated deployment. Anytime you're updating a business critical application, that's where your admin spends nights and weekends. The reason for that is they do a lot of manual steps, like drain scripts, hydration scripts, making sure everything is working fine there. There's no automation around that. Next thing is error handling. If something fails, how do you troubleshoot that quickly? How do you mitigate it? How do you keep that MTTR, the mean time to resolution, as low as possible? The next thing is workload-aware patching. This is the big challenge when you're updating your business-critical applications is understanding the dependencies of these things. It's mostly a tribal knowledge of app owner or like a documentation if you're really lucky. So the huge communication has to happen between the app owner and the central IT there. So Linux is completely a different ballgame. There's not a bunch of tools. Mostly it's done manually, bunch of cron jobs and bash scripts. And even if some tools have, like for example, we have Red Light Satellite, Spacewalk, each of these tools specific are very distro specific. There's no one tool which does across the other extras or distros. So other challenges like orchestration, workload-aware patching are pretty common. So once we have heard all these challenges, the next step what we did was we looked at the existing tools from Microsoft itself, like to understand what are the gaps they have. Are they going to fill up any of your challenges? Do you have to really come up with a new tool? So we looked at Microsoft Update. It's a core service for Windows Update. Our service also relies on that, but doesn't have approvals, doesn't have the or Linux aggregated view. Then there is WSS, which helps you the patch curation, cool approvals, but doesn't do Linux. It's mostly a manual. Then there's SCCM. I've seen a lot of customers when I've spoken earlier, a lot of people use SCCM. It's a beast. It's got a lot of capabilities. Again, doesn't do Linux. So there is cluster-aware patching, VM extension. So each of these tools have solved some problems. But there is no one tool which does across Windows and Linux, across hybrid environments where you're running Azure, non-Azure, which includes on-premises, AWS, Google Cloud Platform. And this answers the questions that many of you asked me earlier in the session, earlier before the session, like, do you guys do hybrid? And the answer is resounding yes. So this service helps you manage your resources manage updates across your hybrid environments. The two big value prop of this service you have to look at is, one is the reporting, which tells you the compliance of your entire environment. The second thing is about ability to take an action so that you can make your machines, your environment compliant. So let's drill on each of that stuff. The first thing is, as you all know, everyone talks about service, but most important thing is how do you get onto the service? Do you spend a lot of time on to get onto the service, enable the service? So one of the things we are trying to work is to simplify the onboarding process so that with just a few clicks, you'll be able to onboard the service and start seeing the value of that. Once you onboard, then you start getting the detailed compliance report, which includes what's my environment looks like. Is it compliant? Is it not compliant? If it's not compliant, which computers are missing? What type of updates they are missing? How long they are missing? They're 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. So you as an admin have an appropriate action to take. When we collect this information from either Windows or Linux, we collect a lot of information. It's something we expose in our UX, and there's a lot of data available in the log analytics search, so you can use some of the queries Chris showed earlier. You can just go customize the queries your way and get your rich dashboards if you want. This is the whole platform extensibility I was talking earlier. Another cool thing what we are launching in Ignite is integrated update experience for Azure VMs. You must have seen this in Scott's keynote. And how many have seen the Scott Guthrie's keynote? Handful. There's one thing, we repeated that in Jeremy's operations and securities management. We repeated the same thing there. So this is a new thing. So when you go to an Azure virtual machine, whether it's a new or created, you can actually see a new operations center as a table of contents. On that, you can see update management, which Chris briefly showed that earlier. One thing I want to highlight is this service doesn't ask you to change any of our existing configurations. Whatever configurations you have, we honor that. On Windows, if your machines are configured to either Windows Update Agent or configured to move, we just honor that. In the Linux, whatever the distro repo is talking to, the yum, apt-get, zyper, we just honor whatever you have. Even for scanning, we just leverage the native Windows and Linux tools. For example, on Windows, we scan every 12 hours by invoking the Windows Update Agent. But every 15 minutes, we call another Windows APIs to check if something has got changed. If anyone have uninstalled it, we check and rescan the things. On the Linux, every 3 hours, we scan and send the data back. In terms of OS support, we support 2008 R2 and above. And from Linux, it's Red Hat, CentOS, SUSE, and Amazon Linux. Okay. On the Linux side, we have done a lot of data enrichment because we give equal love to Linux. And the first thing is advanced reporting. So if I'm a Linux admin, if I just go to the box, if I run the standard yum, apt-get, or zyper commands, I can easily know what packages are missing from my environment. If you're an advanced Linux admin, you can go pull the OVAL file, which is Open Vulnerability Assessment Language. You can go to any of the vendors, pull that file, which tells what are the vulnerabilities available. But it's not easy to map that vulnerabilities to what packages you're missing and how it does impact you. And that's the value what we provide by doing two things. Number one, as you can see, we collect what's missing from the packages, from the machines. Number two, we pull the OVAL files at regular intervals every day, and we merge and process both of them, and you generate a lot of security context, like what is the classification, what is the severity, what is the CVE scores, which a lot of Linux admins care about. The next enrichment what we have done is a consolidation of package classifications. And the reason we have done is there's no unification of classification across distros. So if you go to Red Hat box, it tells you at a high level security or others. Each package is type of that. Under security, Red Hat is a little bit more mature. It tells you whether it's critical, high, medium, low. But if you go to Ubuntu or SUSE, there's nothing on the box other than telling you high level security and others. If you pull the OVAL file, it gives you some more information like high, medium, low. So there's no equal mapping across the distros. And that's the value what we have done. We try to consolidate across the Linux distros. And this we have already validated with our existing cohort customers, about 200 people. And we expose both of them in the UX. So you can see what we classified, what we mapped, and what the vendor has given, both side by side. So you know what is the mapping. So in terms of versions, Red Hat 5.6.7, CentOS 5.6.7, SUSE 11 and 12, Ubuntu 14, 15, 16, and Amazon 2015 to 2017. Those are the yellow ones are the one what we support today. Okay, that's enough of me talking. I'll just show you what we have. So this is my Azure portal, and I've pinned the things which I want to show today. So I said the first thing is, how do you enable this update management service? Let me start with an Azure virtual machine. So this is, I'll pick up my payroll web server. So this is Azure virtual machine. I just want to show that. It's running, I believe it's a Linux operating system. It's running Linux operating system. So if you go there, there's a new operations category what we have. Underneath that, you can see update management as a native capability to an Azure VM. Now I'll click on that. And you can see that it's not enabled on this VM, and there's a super complex job we have to do right now clicking on this enable. And as I said, update management service requires a workspace and an automation account. So if you do not have one, we will create a default for you. But if you already have, we give the flexibility of just picking the ones what you already have. And you have to do one more super complex job of clicking enable. That takes care of enabling the whole service at the back end. We will do what all required under the covers. That's going to take some time, because it has got to install, get the workspace, get the automation account, link it together. So let me jump on to a VM, which is already enabled. This time I'm going to pick my database server on a payroll. Make sure it's clear. Okay. So again, I went to another virtual machine, Azure. I clicked on the update management. So this is a new dashboard. How many of you have seen this in other keynotes? Looks like only a few people. So this is the new experience. I'm going to give a brief tour before I jump on all the capabilities. And the first what you see is a compliance, which shows that this VM is not compliant. And our definition of compliance is whether it's missing critical and security updates. And we understand that compliance is different for different people. For me, it's critical and security. For you, it's everything. So in the near future, we'll give you a flexibility where you can create your own policy to define how your compliance look like. The second is an update-centric view. It shows on this VM what type of updates I'm missing. I'm missing critical, security, and others. So you as an admin know what to do. If all your updates are missing critical, it's a showstopper. If it's all missing are close to others, then it's time to have some party tonight, and you can take care of that tomorrow. This one shows if there are any failed deployments, so that you can take an immediate action. This links to our documentation, give you in-context documentation link. You don't need to worry about where is this documentation. And you can give you the feedback right from the portal experience. If you like something, if you want a new capability, you can just provide a click right here. And here, one of the tabs is called Missing Updates. Will actually show you what updates you are missing on this particular virtual machine. Looks like it's missing a critical update. It gives some metadata here. But if you drill through it, it will go to a log analytics search, which will provide you a lot more metadata about this particular update. So this is a Windows update. So you can see additional information like what is the classification, does it require a reboot, who approved this. You get a lot more metadata on this thing there. We are exposing something in the UX, but there's a lot more data what we collect. So you can build your own queries on the top and get your own dashboards. You can see that in the tabular column, it also shows how long this particular critical update has been missing. It's missing from more than 180 days, something for me to take action right sooner, right after this. Okay? So let me just go back to that VM again. So the next tab, what you see is an update deployments, which will show you if you have any deployments completed. You can drill through that, get all the results. I'll show that in the next demo. This shows if you have any scheduled deployment, so you can actually see next runtime. So if you are updating a business critical applications, this is where you know exactly what's going to happen, when this is going to happen there. So since this VM is non-compliant, if you want to take an action, you click on this, you can take an action. We'll go that in the next demo. But this is the compliance of just one VM. Obviously, you want to know the compliance of your entire VM, not just one VM. So there's something called manage multiple computers. Just drill through that. So this gives me a whole multi-VM experience of compliance across my environment, both Azure and non-Azure. Just reduce this a little bit. So the first question you'll get is, how did these machines come up there? I started with a single VM. How do I add more machines to my service? So on the top, you can see 2 buttons there. The first thing is Add Azure VM. So this will bring up all the VMs in your subscription where you can add to your management. It's going to load. And you can select all the VMs and add to your management service. If you have an on-premises, or you have an Azure AWS VM, or if you have a Google Cloud Platform, you can do anything non-Azure. You can go click on this one. That will bring up our documentation page. We'll actually show you how to get an agent installed, how to add that to your workspace so that it will bring under management. Okay? This is a compliance view from a computer perspective right now. So in my environment, I've got 32 computers, out of which 28 are non-compliant. And this gives me the breakdown of that thing. Out of 28 computers are missing critical and security, 28 are missing other type of updates, but there are 0 not assessed, which is good, which means all my computers are completely assessed. And if there are any problematic machines which cannot be assessed, we'll show right here, and you can drill through that. So this is an update-centric view, shows of all the updates I'm missing in my environment, what is the breakdown of that updates. Same thing as what I talked earlier, learn more, same thing. In the interest of time, I'm just going to the main highlights here. So this is a new tab in the computer. Since you are in a computer-centric view, you've got across your environment. This shows what's my computer environment, which are compliant. It shows what environment is it. Is Azure, whether it's Windows or Linux. As I said, we give equal love to Linux. The last time I showed you the metadata, what we collect from Windows. I also talked about the enrichment, what we have done. So let me just quickly show you that. So this is a Linux VM. Let me drill through. I'm going to use my log analytics filtering capabilities. Since it brings up about 290 results, I want to filter that to only critical and security. So if you see here, this is a Linux Red Hat 7.3. It shows what packages is missing, what is the built-in URL, what is the package severity, what is the CV score. This was the data enrichment I was talking about and the classification. And you can see both of them side by side, what we created the classification, what is the vendor has given. The same thing, you can see that in a tabular column. Okay, that's a quick overview. So let's jump on back to the solution. So till now, I've shown only Azure VMs, a Linux VM or a Windows VM. So if I have the same experience what you get, whether it's an Azure VM or a non-Azure VM, so if I pick up a non-Azure VM, you get the same experience. Go to search, you can get all the data, what you have, and you can go create your custom queries. You can use filter capabilities. Same thing, the list view, get the table view, and you can get a search perspective. You can actually see how long your updates have been missing. In my environment, looks like most of my updates are like very old updates. So I'm not doing a good job here, so I need to go back, take care of something. So that completes our reporting aspects, how we are showing the compliance reporting there. So we'll go back and now I want to take an action. So remediation is about installing updates on those non-compliant machines. So when I'm trying to install an updates on any environment, the 3 things are most important to me. The first thing is, what updates do I install? Do I install critical updates, security updates, or all type of updates? So we provide you an approval capability at a classification level. That's what most of our customers asked. So you can approve it. You can approve only critical, only security with the power of exclusions. If you know a particular update is going to break your line of business application, you can just exclude that. You can do the exclusion at a deployment level. You can do it exclusion at your all the deployments by creating a variable. The next important question we'll ask is when to install. Installing updates is not a one-time job. It's going to be recurring. So we provide a lot of flexible scheduling options, one-time, weekly, monthly. You want to do a last day of the month. You want to align with Patch Tuesday. You want to do 4th Saturday. You have all the flexibilities. The third question comes up is target computers. Where should I install these updates? You already have groups, like Active Directory groups, SCCM collections. So we'll let you leverage your existing collections or select a single computers. So one of the things, at least 5 people asked me earlier, was about SCCM integration. So this is about integrating with your existing solutions. Most of our enterprise customers who are Windows heavy use SCCM. And we first launched the service, we provided reporting for SCCM management clients. I'm very happy to announce the preview of SCCM integration, where we're going to install updates on SCCM managed clients. That's a hyperlink here. If you click there, it'll actually open up a doc that explains all the options what we have. At a high level, we provide two options. The first option is Configuration Manager SUM, Software Update Management Connected Scenario. Second one is a SUM Disconnected Scenario. And the way you do that, first thing is use an SCCM OMS connector. How many people are familiar with OMS connector? There's only a handful. So what you do is SCCM OMS connector is you go to SCCM and you configure this connector, which gives you power to select which collections in SCCM you want to send it to OMS. Because in SCCM, as a privacy, you don't want to send every collection. So that's the first step you do. The second step is depending on what options you selected, whether you selected a SUM connected scenario. In that case, you perform everything in SCCM. You go create a package, you go create a program, you create a software update group, you deploy to your distribution points. Then you invoke, come to update management, invoke an action there. So in this case, when the time triggers, our agent calling the CM agent is the one performing the task and sending the data back. It's going to leverage all the CM content distribution, all the infrastructure, what you have, you can leverage that. The second scenario, what we have, a disconnected scenario, you also go to SCCM admin portal, and you go create a client setting, and the collections, what you selected in the OMS connector, you're going to disable that from some policies, software update management policies. That machines will get all other policies, like if you are using SCCM for OS deployment, software distribution, everything will work, except the some policies. You can also schedule that, so it doesn't work only for a certain time there. So those are the two integration options. The link has got complete details, how to use that stuff. Request all of you try it out, give us the feedback. Lastly, how this whole thing works. One of the key questions people earlier were asking me is that okay? How do we get the patch content? So as I said earlier, we honor whatever existing configuration you have. Your machine is talking to WSS, downstream server, however you configure, we pull from there. If the machine is talking to move, we pull from there. If your Linux box is talking to appropriate distro, we pull from there. In terms of, for doing all the reporting, we are leveraging our proven log analytics platform, and performing action, we are leveraging our automation platform, which Chris talked earlier about hybrid workers and everything. I have an architecture diagram, which I'll show after how the whole operation works after my demo. In terms of OS support, Windows Server 2012 and above from Windows, you can also do 2008 R2. How many people are still running 2008 R2? Only few. But there's a workaround to do that in 2008 R2. And Linux, the same distros of what I've shown earlier. Okay, I'll jump on to showing how to perform action. So I'm back to my dashboard. Earlier I talked about like when you want to take an action, this is where you click, schedule update deployment. I'll give name Ignite demo. And you can choose whether you want to do Windows computers or Linux computers. And here you can choose all the computers what we have, what you want to install updates on. This is where you will be able to select the groups. And this is the approval capabilities I was talking about, where you have the power of selecting what type of updates you want to install, whether you want to install critical security or all types of updates. If you want to exclude certain updates, if you know a particular update is going to be problematic, this is where you select. In case of Windows, you just put the KB IDs, like example 4338782, one of the cumulative updates. If you're using Linux, use a string expression like star.kernel, any of the stuff. And if you want to schedule, they have rich scheduling options. The people who said the yes to the automation platform we're using, there is a scheduling. We are using the same scheduler, so you get the same capabilities. Like a one-time recurring, you can do days, weeks, month. You pick up a last day of the month, or you can choose like second Saturday, third Saturday, fourth Saturday, any of the capabilities. The last thing is the maintenance window capability. So once you set the time, we will install the updates only during this time, including the rebooting. So I'm not going to create a deployment, but I'm going to show you how an existing deployment shows how the troubleshooting will happen. So I'll click on my update deployments. I'll pick up a distributed applications. I have my HR app, which has got distributed. I've got 6 machines in it. I've got 4 of them in Azure, 2 of them in So this is the results. After the deployment is done, this is how you get the results. So high level shows I've got 6 computers, everything passed. It shows all the updates it got installed, only one is not attempted, and here it goes to a detailed breakdown of which update has been excluded, and these are the different updates got installed. And the cool thing is you can see all the 6 machines, and you can actually drill through each machine and see exactly what happened in each of the machines. So I'll pick up this machine, which will actually shows 80 updates have been installed on this machine. This actually shows what happened, what are the updates got installed. But if you really want to know what exactly happened on the machine, did it really exclude something, did it install, how long did it wait? If you go to all logs, it will show all the streams of showing what happened on the box. So when the time triggered, how did the update operation happen? You can see what are the classifications I selected, what are the updates I excluded, how many updates, it shows installed, downloading. The way it works is when we invoke the Windows Update agent, it gives a list of updates. Then we use a complex logic of understanding, hey, these are the updates to install, but is there any exclusions? Is there any inclusions? Oh, then we have to install the maintenance window, install the first update, check are we still on the time, reboot again, check. So we do all the complex logic and installing all the object, honoring all your things. In case if you're using SCCM collections, we also honor the SCCM maintenance windows, what you specified. Let me show you, I created a simple Amazon deployment where I want to patch my Amazon. I took an Amazon 2017 virtual machine and just did a simple deployment where everything was successful there. Okay. So the one thing I promised earlier was I want to show you the platform extensibility, especially the one what we created for WannaCrypt. So we created a custom solution. Since all the data is available, we just created a custom solution using a view designer. Out of my 32 machines in my environment, I've got 25 Windows and 7 Linux. So this exactly shows me how many computers in my environment are missing vulnerable WannaCrypt updates, which are not assessed, which are protected, which are green. The way it is done is it's going to scan all your machines against a set of KBs, which are part of the Microsoft Bulletin MS-17, which was a fix for WannaCrypt. It's going to scan all your machines against that missing KB IDs, and it's going to generate a report and give the list of machines. From here, I can just quickly create a group and target and use my update management service capabilities to go target that group and just go fix that. By the way, my environment is secure. I removed this update just for the demo, okay? Everything is green in my environment. Okay. So I think that's on the update deployment perspective. So we have seen how do we get the reporting and how do we actually go fix those and made it compliant. That includes the platform extensibility. At a high level architecture too, how this all things works, I just want to brief. The key level point I want to make out is our architecture is same, whether you're doing Windows or Linux. Just the execution artifacts are different. So in case of Windows, we use Windows Update agents, WSS, move. In case of Linux, we leverage the yum apt-get local repositories there. So what happens when the user goes, creates an update deployment, supplies all the information of computers, what scheduling, our exclusions there. So we create a deployment, we create a master schedule in the cloud. And when the time triggers, when the master runbook runs and each of the child machines, each of the patch nodes, whatever we created, we registered the hybrid workers. Everything is done behind the covers, so we make them hybrid workers, and those are polling regularly for a job. Once it gets a job, it depends on a Windows, it goes pokes the Windows Update agent, which will go get the data from move or WSS, depends on how you're configured. This is where our logic comes, depends on how we have given. If you have given a classifications, you have given maintenance windows, exclusions, we honor all of those things. We install each update. Are we still on the time? Yes, then move on and reboot. This is the Windows architecture. The only difference in the Linux, and after this is done, we send the data back, and you can actually see all the reporting in the cloud. That's the whole architecture looks. In case of Linux, everything the same, just it's replaced by yum apt-get or any of the stuff there. Correct. So I'll take the questions there at the end, but this question I will answer. Does it know when to reboot? In our case, right now, we are rebooting every time in case of Linux, but very soon we are giving a flexibility where you can control when to reboot. Thank you. Okay, so now we have seen all the cool capabilities for what Chris showed from update. How much do you think we should price? I'll take a guess. Start with here. How much you want to pay for update and change? Kev, any guess? Okay, good expectations. Maybe high expectations. Here. $5, I like that. Anything here? 20. Okay. Okay. Anything from that side? Okay, cool. Okay, so what's the new pricing models? We have done a lot of work to improve our pricing for both update, config, automation, all the things there. So update management, I think your guess is right. So you can get all the update management service capabilities, whether you're updating, thank you, whether you're updating Azure node or non-Azure node, that's included with the Azure subscription. You just pay for the data what you use for log in Azure log data analytics. I repeat, whether you are updating Azure or non-Azure, you get update management service capabilities at no cost. It's all included in Azure subscription. If you talk about configuration management, if you're configuring Azure nodes, again, that's no cost. It's included as part of your subscription. You just have to pay for the log data, whatever you're using analytics there. If you're using a non-Azure nodes, you get a grant of 5 free nodes. And after the 5th node, you'll start paying $6 per node per month. As far as process automation, the first 500 minutes, it is all, the meter is by execution time, how much time it takes to run your runbook job. You get a 500 free grant, and after that you pay $0.002, which is about $1, you get about 500 minutes. Okay. Then we'll talk about roadmap. We specifically put only the ones what we're going to work in the next 3 to 6 months. We have a huge backlog, but we just put what we are actually going to work on the next near term. So in the grouping, one is the dynamic grouping from update management. So the group selection, what I showed here, it's all about static. And we understand that your groups are dynamically changing. We're going to allow, so we're going to support dynamic groups. Update inclusions. So now we've shown only exclusions. Now you can also put a particular update you want to install anywhere. Reboot control. So he answered the question early. So I understand people want to go past their applications. They want to control when to reboot. So we're going to give you a control like, hey, you can control the reboot. We will not reboot. But most of the times you require a reboot, so you can go reboot whenever at your convenience based on your application needs. The next big item, what we're going to work is on core orchestration capabilities. How do you sequence the deployments? How do you stagger? First you do your dev, then you do a test. If the dev works fine, automatically do the test. If that works fine, automatically do it. If something fails, open a ticket. The integration things will come up later. Then you can do a bunch of pre and post steps. Before updating, you want to ensure that you have prerequisites. You want to run some drain scripts. Right after updating your machines, you want to do some post steps like hydration scripts or making sure the services are running healthy. The other big thing, what we are working on the scale sets. You have seen a first-class experience for Azure VMs. We're going to support a first-class experience for Azure scale sets. So with that, I'll hand over to Chris to talk about cool things coming in config management.
Thanks, Ravi. So in change in inventory, first order of business, we want to give you a lot more types of data, different configuration services added to files, registry, services, software that we're doing today. So you have a lot more data to operate with there. We also want to make it easier for you to identify what changes were made on your system when you're using desired state configuration so that you can visualize what was done with DSC versus not. And then we have a lot of features there. Inventory is all brand new in preview. I want to take your feedback and make sure we bring that to our GA quality. In DSC, we have a number of features forthcoming. I showed you a bit about doing scheduled assignments of configurations. We're going to add an experience for that in the portal. And we're going to allow you to target groups of servers where you've defined dynamic groups on search queries, and rather than creating lists of nodes in PowerShell. We're also, like you've seen Ravi and I show on that VM portal in Azure, where you can do inventory and change tracking and update management today. We're going to bring some DSC integration there so you can assign configurations and monitor those configurations from the VM blade. And then we're adding an experience, again, to help you simplify the creation of configurations from what we call composite resources. And those are shareable pieces of configuration so that you'll be able to kind of pick and choose pieces of configuration to create a new configuration. So thanks. We hope this was informative and useful for you. We're happy to take some questions.
One thing I want to call out is, I know you must be attending a lot of sessions and you might be getting tons of data in Ignite. It's very hard to remember everything. But there's one thing you want to remember when you go out of this class, out of this room and out of Ignite. There's two things. From an update management perspective, we provide orchestrated update management across your hybrid environments, across Windows and Linux. You want to re-emphasize?
Yeah, and between inventory and change tracking and our desired state configuration, we have a rich set of configuration features for discovering and monitoring and enforcing and deploying configurations in your environment.
Please do evaluate session, give us a feedback so we can continually improve on this one. Thank you so much. We're open for questions now.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yes. Sure. Yes, okay, the question is, are we going to support availability sets? So that's in our plan right now. When you do the VMs for the first step, then we go to availability sets or scale sets. That's our order to go.
Question. We have a lot of compute nodes which cost a lot, so they are normally shut down to save cost. If I want to use this update, will it boot up the machine, patch it, and shut it down again? Or what happened if the VM is shut down in the period of the maintenance window?
So your question is, if I understand correctly, is you have got a nodes, and there was some echo in between, so I'm repeating the question to make sure I understand. So the machines are shut down. So what happens if the machines are shut down? Is that correct? Yeah. So right now, if the machines are shut down, we try to reach it and the hybrid worker does not respond. So it's like, hey, we cannot run the job on that, as if like the machine is not responding back there. But there's a work what we are looking at, like how do you do offline patching if the machines are offline and everything there. But currently it's like, hey, I can't reach it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Reporting side of things, do you cover, from a historical perspective, how patch sets are deployed within the organization so that, the CISOs get the nice little graphs to say, we've remediated X number of machines, and this is how we're going through the
So, good question. If I repeat the question, you're saying that you want to see the historical analysis of when was the patches deployed, was it successful or not, and everything there. So if you look at our solution there, if you go to the update deployments, you can actually show the complete history, which actually shows which deployments ran, which deployments were successful. But you're essentially asking to pull that into a kind of a report thing there, correct? So good feedback. Are you looking to export that into an Excel for reporting perspective? What is the scenario you're looking at?
Yeah, something pretty for the CISO to see that we're doing
Oh, for the pretty
jobs.
for the XX to actually see that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, it's good feedback. I don't know, we don't have that capability. You can see that. You can. We have shown a nice charts. Like once you go to the deployments, you can take a screenshot of that, or you can put on Visio. I know where you're coming from, so that's a good feedback. We'll take that down.
Is there a booth you guys have?
Yes. So there is a booth called Azure Automation and Configuration, and under Azure Security and Operations. It's on the corner. So most of our teammates are sitting there, standing there to help out any questions there.
And you'll be there tomorrow, right?
I'll be there, and here's my card as well. If you want, like anytime, any questions, our team is also here. Reach us to anything there. Thank you for your feedback. Correct, that's all right.
Can you clarify, did you say config manager is required for the on-prem patching?
What's required for config
manager? Do you have to have configuration manager?
No, we do not need. The question is, the question is, do we need to have configuration manager? The answer is no. We do not need to have configuration manager. If the machine is configured to Woomo, we'll directly pull from there. If the machine is configured to WSS, we'll go pull from there. So you don't need to have it. If you have it, we'll honor that the content management that you have, but you do not need to have it.
But you do need to have a WSS server.
Or you can directly connect it to Microsoft Update. Move. You don't need to have even WSS.